Um, so, uh, Consuela, you are you are an educator out of South California. You want to go ahead and give a brief interview or introduction of yourself, your position, etc.
Yes, I'm always amused that you say South California. I think that's probably a Florida thing, but
Well, how do
we
you?
call it Southern California. But yes, I'm an educator in Southern California. I have been an educator for, gosh, 21, going on 22 years.
Mhm.
I've been an administrator, school site, at the school level as an administrator for this will be going into my fourth year with the new school year that we're
Okay.
looking at starting in August. Um, I don't know what else. What
No,
else did you want to
no,
know?
that's good. Yeah, you've seen the classroom from multiple perspectives, for
Yes,
sure. Um, Also, let me just clarify. There's nothing southern about California.
that's true. There's nothing southern about it. That's just like how we like to refer to it. But yeah, Southern California, my whole educational career.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
All right. So, so the kind of the first things that I wanted to touch on, because there is a lot of vagueness about what's been going on, is so I wanted to kind of walk through how things all went over this past school year, starting with kind of in the early sorry, in the early parts of the pandemic. Of course, uh, February, March, etc. It was being heavily downplayed. Um, what what was the atmosphere like? What was there any discussion of taking action? When did the first call to action start? What was basically the atmosphere and response level in the earliest days of the COVID pandemic? How did that all play out?
Remember when we were starting to get more and more news about it, there was just kind of a general uncertainty. We weren't really sure what we were going to have to do, because as you already stated, it was being downplayed.
Mhm.
Um, and so we weren't sure how exactly that was going to impact us. But um, I recall, like I said, we knew it was something was brewing, probably
Right.
for maybe a couple of weeks. We knew that there might need to be some adjustment made. And then I remember distinctly when surrounding districts to the one I was in at the time, because I did switch districts over during this pandemic period. Um, it was, I kind of really do feel like it was a domino effect because it's almost like if I remember correctly, it's like we were watching the larger districts to see what they would do
Okay.
in terms of the information that we were getting. And there was just a lot of concern about what do we do if we close down, because the schools, at least in my lifetime, have never had to do that.
Right.
I feel like schools, in or districts in areas where they've had to deal with natural disasters, had better standing in this case,
Okay.
because I know there was I heard, definitely a lot about, like the just experiences with Hurricane Katrina, for example, where districts in that area were a little bit better prepared potentially to deal with something like this, because they've had to face closure before.
Hmm.
But here in Southern California, what do we close for?
Mm.
We don't get snow days or any, yeah, I know we're an earthquake country, but fortunately, I'm knock on some wood, we don't have to deal with, uh, you know, there hasn't been a great occurrence of those kind of natural disasters for us to have to look at school closure. So when the larger districts were making that decision, when their school boards were deciding it's time, we need to close based on the information that we have, um, then it was really a domino effect after that. I can
Okay.
say confidently between the two school districts, the one I was in at the time and the one I'm in now, they closed around the same time. I think most schools were closing, the majority in my area were closing up in March of 2020. It was, in our case, we tried to push it to spring break. That's around our spring break time. We were hoping to at least get to that point. And then once we closed, we were hopeful that we wouldn't have to stay closed too long. But obviously that was not the case. We stayed closed for, over a year, basically. So schools started opening up again come April, but I don't want to go on talking too much. If you
No, you're fine. These are long form interviews. It's not like CNN where people get 30 seconds to answer.
Right.
No, so it sounds like there wasn't really a plan that was directed from the state or district level. It sounds like these were actions that were kind of just made on an individual, like, district and school level.
As far as when to close, yes, because it was really largely up to the school boards, and the direction we were getting from the state. But like I said, I felt like initially in the beginning, it was a lot of school boards deciding for themselves based on the information given that they should close.
Okay. Kind of a follow-on to build on that. Do you think that it would have been better if there had been more state or federal guidance on how to assess this sort of risk?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I know that the districts felt largely on their own.
Right.
Like, what are we doing? What needs to happen here? How seriously are we supposed to be taking this? Because you know how it was. Just the amount of misinformation and no information and lies and things that were going out. It just, how do you work with that? How do you know what to take seriously or how serious the situation is?
Right.
And that's what I felt was coming from the higher ups in the district. Because like I said, I'm at the site. So, the information I get comes from, our directors and our associate superintendent, school board. So there's some layers there, and I'm not always privy to all the information, but, I definitely got the impression that they were doing the best with the information they had, and that the districts were really looking to one another. There were a lot of superintendent meetings and the superintendents talking about what do we need to do here, and let's do this together. Let's make sure we're all on the same page and what we're doing, what's best for kids.
Right. Obviously, closing down itself has a lot of far-reaching impacts. Did schools or districts get any federal or state aid in paying for any equipment or anything that was needed for actually adapting to this or handling any sort of shutdown or pivot towards distance learning stuff?
Yes, again, because of the timing of when all this happened at the tail end of my time with my previous district, I don't recall seeing or hearing much conversation about funds for things, because when I left, our school year is over at the very end of May. So, we shut down in March. Then I remember it was just this flurry of activity trying to make sure the kids had work to do and distributions for parents to come to the school to get things, trying to figure out where they were going to get the devices to send home. Because in my former district, they were not one-to-one. So there's a lot of, other school districts in the area, even here immediately in Southern California as well. I know across the nation that are already one-to-one with devices, right? So a student has a device. Each student in the school has a device. So the district I was at previously, that was not the case. And so they were really scrambling.
Just to back up a little bit there, for anyone who doesn't know, what do you mean by a student has a device? What sort of device?
Typically, it's a Chromebook, some kind of light, not even like a full-blown laptop. So Chromebook-like, yes.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
But speaking to devices, I mean, in that district where that wasn't the case, you had people trying to do school or connect on iPads and cell phones, and yeah, just and the just you can't do school on a cell phone. I mean, you can't.
Right.
You can connect, you can do email, you can communicate and whatnot, but for the larger things that you need to do, strictly cell phone is not ideal.
Right. I can't
So
imagine writing a book report on a tiny little phone keyboard.
Right, exactly. Or writing it by hand and taking a picture to send it to your teacher.
Oh gosh.
Like the teacher's going to read that.
Yeah.
So that district had a lot of challenge in terms of devices and getting those to students. And I remember it was really a scramble, basically. And my current district did this as well, because I got to see it when I came on with my current district. But basically pulling all available devices and then they had to be reconfigured because they were set up to work on the school's network, and now they had to be set up to work at home. And so like our IT departments were, I feel like those people were the most taxed and stressed in this time, because they're having to do all this work and get it out to families as soon as possible. And then in my last district, it was really, it was strange that people wanted devices. They knew that they were going to need devices and they don't have them. And so we had to kind of take stock of the devices we had and prioritize families like based on need. And then you have all these people calling to make their arguments for why they need a device. And for some it was convenience because they have 6 kids and they need more devices. For others, it's socioeconomic. It's that, just like everything you've probably heard about, digital divide and things like that, it was really brought into the spotlight as far as what families don't have. And so just being able to make sure that we were serving all of our students, but especially the needier ones that had less than everyone else, but trying to make those distinctions was really rough. And then getting more devices when the funds did come, because I know you were asking about funding and I'm kind of going all over the place, but when the funds did come, then there's too much demand on Chromebook like devices that you can't get them because everybody's ordering them. Right. So there were huge delays in getting new ones.
Interesting. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah. So I felt like my previous district was probably struggling a bit more with getting devices in the hands of families. When my new current school district, they had already had one-to-one in the classroom. So what I observed, as far as from my perspective at the school site, which again is not right in the trenches with our IT department, is it seemed like there were more computers readily available and we could get computers to more families. I want to say faster, but in the end, it wasn't necessarily the case, because my current school district is a smaller school district with a smaller IT department. So while we had the computers, getting them reprogrammed took a while because we had limited staff who could do that.
Right.
And then getting it into their hands, and then all the tech support that came with it after that.
Yeah.
So to answer your question about funding, yes, funding was available. That was what was a different feeling for me as an educator, as long as I've been an educator, because I feel like they've been taking money from schools for many, many, many years. To suddenly have money, to hear from our associate soup of business services that we have COVID funds. That's what she would talk about. We have COVID funds, and we would have to put in requests to her as far as what we wanted to use our COVID funds on. And it was really kind of different because it was really kind of wide open. If you could justify to her why you needed this, how it was a COVID related expense, most things got approved, because you need different type of furniture, right? Because normally, or furniture period, because schools have really moved away from, at least in my area, or that I've, in my experience, have started to move away from that traditional setup of the classroom with the desks and rows and whatnot.
Right.
A lot of times that furniture has been removed and there's more of what's been called flexible seating. So it's more comfortable, it's different, bean bags and, just, what are they, the yoga balls and things like that. And so then we had to kind of pull away from that. And now we don't have furniture anymore because It had all been surplused or salvaged or whatever. And now we're scrambling. We need furniture. We need desks. So we need to order that. And then there's the PPE. And that was a given, of course. There was no need to justify that. But we had masks. We had an incredible amount of masks. Like I remember when, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but when we did finally have kids back on campus, I would be, greeting them or what have you. And then, I would have a bag with me that was just full of masks. So anyone who needed one, it was like, just whip it out. Here's a mask. And they were good quality too. They weren't your, just kind of disposable ones. These were ones that could be washed and used again. Okay. So I felt like they were really good quality and different sizes because my school serves, TK. I'm an elementary educator. So you're talking about TK, which is transitional kindergarten, which is 4-year-olds, all the way. Our school goes up to 4th grade. So, so you've got 10, 11-year-olds. So there's a big size difference there. So to have PPE that fits everyone, is great. We also had, money was used, like I said, on the masks. We had face shields for the teachers or anyone who wanted those. They were required to wear both. It wasn't one or the other. We got that question a lot. We also had kind of industrial air purifiers in each classroom, each workspace. And hand sanitizer stations were installed, and we made sure we had each one of those in each classroom had one, as well as common areas. We also invested in the kind of plexiglass partitions so that those could be put up around the desks while in the classroom. So again, to answer your question, money did come from there. I know there was, because there was the CARES Act, and there was those funds, and there, if I remember right, there were like 3 instances of funding, and then we still have money going forward, but we're also being very cautious with that money because we know it's not going to go on forever.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. Yeah. So, as far as the actual spending, like you had budget and you kind of were putting together plans mostly locally. What did that implementation look like as you moved towards towards distance learning? What did the actual implementation look like? How was it received by students and parents?
Well, I feel like most everyone hated the idea.
Well, change is hard.
Change is hard, but you know me and you know my background. I am, I guess, an advocate for online learning. So this is my wheelhouse.
Right.
And so I feel like I helped some teachers bridge the gap there. But also, they had to do it. There's no choice.
Right.
And so it wasn't pretty, I'll tell you, because, I definitely was in a lot of, Zoom classrooms, and, they were struggling. They really were, because they were trying to do school the way they've always done school. But you can't just take your typical in-person presence and just duplicate it online. It has to be changed. And so, so it was, they did their best. I know that, my current district, because that's when the school year started, that's where I was, right? So July, this time last year, more or less, I was getting acclimated to my new district. We have some we had a lot of support from our teachers on assignment who work with training teachers. And so there was a lot of support for teachers in terms of just professional development and trying to get them the information on the tools they needed to be successful. A lot of support when things weren't going right or working right. I know I had one of my teachers I was basically on speed dial for her. I was her direct text support. She could call me, text me. I would go right to her classroom and help her with what she needed help with. And, she wasn't the only one, but there's definitely one that stands out who was very, very vocal about needing assistance. And I was happy to provide it. But, we've definitely had, I remember an instance with a teacher in tears. Like, she was just so stressed out by this, that, it really rocks some teachers where they know they're good teachers and they didn't feel that way now. And it was basically everybody was a first year teacher all over again, no matter if you had 30 years or 3. And it was really unsettling, especially for the more senior teachers. Kids were kind of back and forth about it. Obviously, in the end, the majority of them want to come back to school because they miss playing with their friends. They miss the socializing, the way they're used to it. Parents, initially, I felt like were resistant, but in the end, I feel like many of them came around to it.
Okay.
That I think many of them also realized that online learning had some benefits for them and their schedules, and also be more present and active in their child's education. So I felt like there was a lot of positive there.
Okay, yeah. Let's walk through that one at a time. What are so obviously with the teachers, having to adapt kind of teaching style and how they read and interact with students is quite a challenge. Are there any kind of specifics of what some of those challenges were and how they were overcome?
Well, for me, it really boiled down to the just different ways to engage your students. I think a lot of them fell back on kind of a lecture style, which is not, because they don't know what tools to use now, right? To do what they used to do. And they needed time to figure that out. So here we have to start. We have to get the information out. We have to, we have teaching and learning to do. So, it's a learning curve.
Yeah.
So, as I was in classrooms, like I said, and I saw a lot of this lecture style stuff going on, and kids, falling asleep at the computer.
Of course.
I saw a number of kids who weren't even out of bed. And I've heard many, many stories from parents whose their kid didn't want to get out of bed. So they logged them in and just put the laptop right next to them in the bed and just left it at that. Also see a lot of empty chairs, right? The laptop's on, they're supposed to be right there, but they're not. And it's hard, especially for all students, but in particular the little ones, because they're not making that distinction. They're still at home. So why do they have to sit there in front of this computer when they're at home with their toys and their dog and their cat? And you know how many pets I saw? This is my kitty, and they just hold it up to the screen and there's your, cute little cat mewing and whatever. Of course. So, there was a lot of show and tell, which was cute in some instances, but otherwise sometimes a little distracting when you're trying to get stuff done. But so over time, it became, as I, discussed this with the other administrator on site, that, there needed to be some more professional development, at least at the site level, in terms of student engagement. So we then dug into that a little bit and the types of tools you can use to engage your students. And there was a lot, interactive whiteboards, teaching them how a bit more about, collaborative documents. Like in my district, we used a lot of Seesaw was like our LMS, our learning management system, for at least elementary. Beyond that we're a Microsoft district. So we were using class notebooks, and there was probably not so much Teams use, but it was mostly class notebooks for the upper grades, 3rd and 4th in our case, if they 3rd had a choice. And basically, the district wasn't mandating a bunch at this time, because they knew the teachers are going to do what they need to do, and a lot of mandates was not going to help. So we just, the only things were, we've paid for Seesaw, use this, we've paid for Class Notebook, Microsoft Office 365, use that. And then other tools came as needed. One in particular that I had worked with my staff on to show them was Kahoot. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one. That's like a quiz kind of format, game kind of thing. I was very much into, playing games and learning games with students when I was in the classroom. And I mean, who doesn't love a game?
Right. So, yeah. If you can make learning fun, it's going to stick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that really seemed to catch on with people, and just trying to think of new ways to make learning fun and engaging. So your kids weren't falling asleep or walking away from the computer, or, but at the same time, there were also instances where teachers were doing a really good job of that, but the home environment was just too much for the student. Like there's a lot of competition in terms of attention, right? If you have, like, I remember a family in particular where it was, a mom, the father worked, the mom was home with the kids, but there was, a baby, a toddler, a student, at our school, old, at least, and then like an older student. But, there was a lot going on in that household. Or there's other people living in the household who may have a TV on or something, and the student doesn't have their own dedicated space. And that was a real challenge. And we tried to do our best as administrators in terms of trying to not only, we're talking about the teachers and giving them the supports and things that they need to be successful, but we also had parent meetings, like we did parent orientations before school started, to try to acclimate them as best they could to distance learning and the sorts of things they had to keep in mind to help their child be successful. And one of those things was a dedicated workspace free of distraction. Now, for some families, that's a lot to ask.
Right.
So, without being in every household, and you get little windows into, a family's household, and some families were definitely uncomfortable with that. We had a lot of resistance to kids having their cameras on because they didn't want, that window into the household. So, there's just privacy issues. They're just not comfortable with that.
Right.
So there was definitely a population that had those kind of feelings.
Okay. Very, that's very insightful, actually. And suppose going to, let's see, you mentioned also that many of the parents did warm up to it over time and saw the benefits, potential benefits of distance learning insofar as like their schedules and such. And their more direct involvement in their child's education. That of course is something that has been kind of falling off more as parents are kept working longer and longer hours, and children are the school is the only place where that happens, and then they go home. And do you think there's a place for that to kind of continue, which I guess is kind of segueing into the next segment of things, but yeah, do you think that kind of renewed marriage of parent involvement with actual teaching is something that can be cemented in some way?
I'd like it to be. I know this train of thought takes me toward the debate that around school districts continuing to provide distance learning as an option going forward into this new school year. And again, as someone who is pro online learning, it's, again, and I say that with a little asterisk, I recognize it's not for everyone.
Sure.
It reminds me of a conversation that I had with the other administrator at my site about how traditional school, the way it was usually set up, is not for everyone. Online learning, same thing, is not for everyone.
Right.
There's different modalities, right? But some of our students were definitely more successful online than in person. As far as an exact percentage, I can't give you that.
Sure.
And my impression from the interactions I've had and the data I've seen is that it's probably a smaller population where they were more successful online, because there's a lot of factors there. And like I said, two of the biggest one is that parent support at home. And so a child ranging in age from definitely 4 years old is not going to be able to do that alone.
Sure.
But even our older ones, our fourth graders, they needed parent support as well. That is a crucial piece of making online learning work.
Okay.
And it was definitely evident in interacting with families and students where that support was not there. And there's many reasons that go into that as well. Whether it's just, we had instances of parents and families either, being really hard hit by COVID, lots of
course, yeah.
loss, right? Loss of family members and things that were really impacting the family. There's, others, where they just couldn't handle it. Like the parent was just not like emotionally able to be there that way for their child. Then there's others where, the parent has to work, so they can't be there. So there's things that go into that piece. But as someone who recognizes that online learning can and does work, I was definitely trying to promote it and the conversations that were happening at the district level, because there are school districts in the area, and again, nationwide, that have virtual schools. They already had them, right? It was a piece of their district already. And that was not the case in my current in my former district, it was. They did have an online school. They were just getting it off the ground a little. They were expanding it before COVID actually hit. So my former district may have been better equipped in that way to provide a distance learning option. And I'm confident that they will continue to do that because it was already there.
Yeah, they have the infrastructure and stuff.
Exactly. With my current one, it's not already there. And they recently decided that they would not do it. They would not continue to offer a distance learning option.
Okay.
And again, many superintendent meetings, because superintendents, they talk to each other a lot, and try to, kind of make meaning of the information they're getting from the state and the government in terms of how their district should move forward. And so, did you have a question? I thought.
Yeah. So, and it also doesn't seem to have to be like an either or, because you're also implementing something kind of a hybrid model. So I'm kind of curious. Your district isn't going forward with like a dedicated online learning, but is there a future for kind of a hybrid classroom?
Well, there's a couple thoughts I had. First, while my district has currently decided not to move over with distance learning, I think that's a position that many districts across the country are taking. Like I'm concerned now because I feel like many districts thought, well, we had to do distance learning. We had to because of the pandemic. But now that things are better, that's a subpar way of learning. We don't need to do that anymore. Like, that's not good for kids. Let's not do it. And so I'm concerned about that perspective of it. It's like, it's just being discarded and we don't want to do that again. Instead of looking to improve upon it.
Right.
So there's that. Also, my district is not alone in the fact that they have like a homeschool program. So as far as I understand, their approach is to kind of expand that offering, but that does require the parent to be at home with their child. There's certain, parameters that need to be met. Now, in terms of your question with the hybrid model, hybrid as I understand it, I'm not optimistic, just because I have this feeling or impression from people I've talked to, parents and some parents and teachers for sure, that they just want to be done with all of it. Like I was saying with the distance learning piece, right? They just want to put it aside. We don't need that anymore. I'm worried, along with my other administrator, that we're worried about going back to normal. We don't want to go back to normal. We want to take this opportunity to reinvent school. And so if and that's still kind of unfolding. So, a hybrid model would require some work being done at home, utilizing, technology and devices. And I could see teachers, because I guess I might be getting hung up on the actual, like what I know the definition of hybrid model to mean, but because it is a portion of your day is in person and a portion of your day is at home, right? So, what I see happening more is like more of a flipped classroom for the teachers who are able to do that, because then it's a more effective way to use your in-person time. So a flipped classroom is usually having kids do the reading or watch the video or listen to the lecture as homework, and then coming to school to do the actual work with that knowledge, to work through activities. instead of using class time to read an article, for example, or watch a video. So I don't know, it's just a more active learning, more engaging learning instead of, all the prep that goes into it.
Right.
So in my opinion, it's a better way to do homework, because that's a whole nother debate on, is homework really, have any impact? And, that's, like I said, that's a whole nother topic. But in terms of hybrid learning, the way I understand it to be, I don't see that happening in this next school year. Is it out of the question? No. But yeah.
Shalun says that sounds closer to the university lecture format.
The flipped.
Yeah, the flip.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, that is disheartening that so many are kind of wanting to just shift back to the way things were rather than taking it as an opportunity to learn and adapt. And unfortunately, that's something that I even see in the technology field, is getting adoption of some new tech, even if it is an improvement. If the user experiences any hardship that, in adapting and learning the new system, they want to throw up their hands and say, it's too hard. I want to go back to what I'm used to. And it's like, you could get so many benefits out of just, soldiering on through a little short-term difficulty for long-term benefits. It is a difficult thing to break through, that resistance to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there, if not distance learning, are there any aspects or lessons that have been learned through this past year that you believe might be able to stick around, that might continue to be adopted? Maybe anything that bridges that digital divide, because that even in a normal classroom, a in-person classroom, having students universally have some sort of digital access does seem like that's an important endeavor, and it sounds like that was not previously adequately addressed.
Yeah, I would like to see. I know of instances where the student has a device at home and at school. And in some cases, it's the same device. Like, it goes back and forth with them.
Right.
So I know that can happen. I know, for example, because we utilized a good deal of our inventory, I guess you could say, of laptops that were previously classroom models to then go home. And like I was saying before, my district had ordered a number of new ones that had just started arriving at the end of the school year. And so those are being programmed to go into the classroom, so those carts can be, refilled. So there'll be one-to-one devices in the classroom again. I would like to see some ability to have maybe the ones that were in use before. I don't know, if they're all going to salvage. I'm sure not all of them are garbage at this point, but to see some more ability to provide families with a device at home, so that we could continue to promote at least even a flipped classroom, because that's something I remember from my days in the classroom when I was trying to do that years ago. There was a difficulty with doing that when they don't have the devices to do it on. So how are you going to flip your classroom if they can't do that work at home?
Right.
So, but that remains to be seen. That's more of a wish of mine. But I think people recognize that there's a value to having a device at home. So I'm curious to see how that knowledge will manifest over the next school year. I think teachers also got a better understanding of thinking of new ways to make learning engaging.
That's good.
And I know in the professional development that I did for my teachers, just that there's different levels of engagement, and there's the behavioral piece, right, where they're basically doing what you ask them to do. And most teachers take that as engagement. That's it. They're engaged. Great. No,
that's obedience.
Exactly. And then there's cognitive engagement, and that's the big piece. We want them to be cognitively engaged, and be invested in their learning, and not be passive about their learning, and be driving their learning. And that's a big one. Right. And a lot of teachers recognize that's like the holy grail of engagement, but they don't necessarily always know how to get there. Yeah. And it's really not some simple little recipe that you could just hand out to everybody. This is how you get there. But it's knowing your students and using different strategies to make learning engaging for them, and being willing to part with the things that don't work. Just because you've been doing it that way all these years doesn't mean that it's the best way to do it. And then there's your emotional engagement. And I feel like a lot of teachers are good at that because that's the relationship piece. Right. So, teachers that I observed in my school, my new school, the teachers care. They care about their kids like their own. And so that piece is there, but it's that cognitive engagement piece that's missing. And I feel like this experience has given teachers an opportunity to take a closer look at that. And I'm hoping that going forward that they'll remember that and keep thinking about that instead of just falling back to old ways, comfortable ways of doing things. Other things, as far as what we learned, giving students feedback, immediate feedback. That's another really powerful piece. I know my school and school district is their one big initiative is visible learning. And one of the things that impacts learning a great deal is that immediate personal feedback, not just a great job, but, really looking at somebody's work and giving them meaningful feedback to help them make it better. Right. Or to praise them for something done well, and not good job, but being very specific about what you did well, and how, or even having more of a dialogue with a student about their work. That's a real big way to help engagement. And there were more opportunities for that, especially through our learning management system through Seesaw, and giving students comments on their work, because that was a lot of the time, the interaction they were having with their teacher. So that was really important. Another lesson learned was about our professional learning communities. PLC is what we call them in the education world. PLCs have been a part of schools for many years now. And I think, it's definitely in this time that collaboration with your colleagues has been crucial, especially, I remember many comments about teachers kind of identifying who the techie one was, and how much more important that was, how important that is now, and just sharing tech ideas with each other and having that kind of collaboration to make their Zoom classrooms more engaging, or if they were having a problem, with something or a challenge, that they could lean on their team to help get through that. Yeah, peer support. Yeah, exactly. One of the other things that was a really big, positive lesson learned was we had a number of our school meetings on Zoom, and it made it so much easier for parents and other stakeholders to attend. So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So for example, most schools, as in my experience, have a monthly parent meeting. Usually it's called Coffee with the Principal or something like that. And so it's usually in the morning on a weekday. So you only get, the parents who have that work schedule or stay at homes to come to those. Very low attendance then. Exactly. Typically they're very, very low in attendance, in my experience. Sure. So we started having our parent meetings as Zoom meetings in the evening. And when we did our parent orientations, we offered them at 3 different times. We offered a weekday morning, a weekday evening, and a midday on the weekend, just so that we could get as much information out to our parents as possible. That was probably not only well received, but also allowed, since they were kind of smaller groups, probably allowed you to focus on any questions a little better. Absolutely. And I think we got a lot of positive feedback. Well, I know we did. From our online parent meetings. Typically those meetings, I know my the other administrator, I think he felt like it was a popularity contest at times because he wanted to see how many people would attend the Zoom. And then that was another frustration because remember I was telling you about the devices not being available.
Yes.
And there was an issue with Zoom because they had so much demand in terms of getting Zoom fully implemented that my district bought Zoom. They bought the license they needed, but it took them like 2 months to turn it on.
Wow.
Yeah. Huh. So we had, your normal free Zoom access, but in order to have the larger attendance,
right,
in terms of people in the Zoom, we couldn't have big meetings because we were capped at like 100 or something or less, 50, I don't know. And so by the time they finally did turn it on, I mean, we had a parent meeting when we were talking about reopening that had 160 parents in it.
Ooh.
And that's big. Now our school, my school in particular, is big. It's like 720 students.
Yeah.
And that's only TK to 4. It's 720 students. That's a big school. And so our initial meetings were much smaller than that. Typically, they were about 20 to 30. Mm-hmm. So to see it blow up to 160 was impressive. I think my administrator and myself, we're both administrators together. I think we made a really good team in that, and that wasn't daunting to us. We were glad to see so many families coming to the Zoom meeting to get the information they needed, and answer their questions.
Right.
And I feel like we worked so hard to make sure our parents had information and that they were getting their questions answered, so that that they felt prepared, as prepared as they could be.
Right.
And I think we were very transparent with the knowledge that we had. We weren't keeping anything from them. And I know they valued that. So those parent meetings, we're going forward actually keeping one online. We're going to do 2 parent meetings a month. One's going to be on site in person for those families who can do that. And then we're going to keep our evening Zoom for those families who need that.
I think that's a really good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Another really helpful, I guess another helpful aspect of the Zoom feature is that we had many of our intervention meetings and our special education meetings that way. We're having they're basically the meetings about the students' individualized education plan, or IEPs. Mm-hmm. And so we had those. I oversaw intervention meetings for students who didn't have an IEP but were struggling and needed some attention. So we had those meetings as well. Parents really liked having them online because I can't tell you how many I had from the back room of somebody's work, where they were, joining us for the meeting, or they stepped out to their car, or they stepped outside the building, to have the meeting. And so it was much more convenient for everyone. So I know we're going to keep that going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's I do sympathize with the parents a lot in that, because especially through COVID, everyone was just trying to figure out what their own work schedule is going to be, especially people who were thrown into the ever-changing essential workers category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, that's good. I'm glad there are some changes sticking around, even if it's not more or significantly more widespread distance learning. It does sound like there will be some positive changes sticking around from that, mm-hmm. from this experience.
And, before you ask another question, there was a thought I had about I know for a fact we're going to have more programming after school, and because of COVID funds that have been made available to us. And I know that was something that I lamented as an educator, watching kind of fade away as far as those after school opportunities, either for enrichment or intervention, so that we can serve our students beyond the school day. So actually, I know my co-administrator and myself are looking forward to having those conversations with teachers who want to do that after school program, or those different programs. And I'm not talking about like just tutoring services. Like I know my last school, where it had an impressive assortment of after school programming, they had like yoga and robotics and, just different things of interest. They had like a service club. They had like, Kiwanis and things for kids. They had a walking club, a running club, things like that.
Yes.
And so it was just, I'm really excited about those kinds of opportunities for our students. And so, I mean, that's, I think, another lesson learned from this experience is that our students need those. They really do. And so I'm really glad that we're going to have funding for that and that we're already talking about, putting some things together.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, that I haven't been in the school system for quite a while, so I haven't noticed that decline. But yes, that's another reason why it's really useful to get first-hand information, because you've been in the school system you've been an educator for quite a while, so have seen a lot of these trends.
Yes.
So you mentioned a number of things that, positives that may stick around. Let me ask, what sorts of things do you think could have been handled better with hindsight, or what sorts of things do you think could have been implemented more effectively with, say, better direction or something?
I think, obviously information from the government could have been better. That's a given.
Yeah.
But in terms of locally, like my site, really a lot of difficulty was around getting the devices to families in both districts.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, they both had their own issues around that topic.
Okay.
And then supporting the devices. I got a number of messages and phone calls about the device isn't working, and then having to troubleshoot all that.
Right.
And then the other thing too is it's not just the device we're talking about in terms of the laptop or Chromebook-like laptop, but we also have to provide hotspots as well. So the hotspots in some instances, just the hotspot like a cell phone is not always going to get the best signal sometimes. Or if you have 6 kids at home, one hotspot for all 6 is probably not the best idea.
Yeah, it's going to be bogged down.
Exactly. So I felt just on the more like mundane level was the devices and hotspots. But again, I understand the reasons for that, and for the suddenness with which things happened and the way that things were made available, or using what we had already and kind of repurposing them with the staff we already have.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was hard to either hire more IT people because they're very much in demand, and retaining them again because they're very much in demand.
Right.
So if you're going to you got to pay your people right if they're going to stick around. So so that was a challenge. But
so do you think that with that kind of being maybe the harshest sore point, that taking a more proactive approach, not just when there's a need for distance learning, but just very proactively making sure that all students have some sort of hotspot and device, would mitigate kind of an IT rush happening should something like this happen again in the future?
Yeah, I agree completely. Couldn't have said it better.
Okay. Well, hopefully something like that occurs then.
Yeah.
Also, one thing that I've read a fair bit about is, obviously there have been a lot of kind of changes just in classroom structure and how students are able to in-person interact with one another as schools have been reopening, and policies about what to do in case there is a new COVID case detected. Do you think that there are some of these kind of health safety measures that will be integrated long term? Not just about COVID, but it seems as though some of these measures could help, like the spread of the flu and chickenpox and various other things.
I think that I think we're definitely rethinking our approach to attendance,
Mhm.
because typically the advice has been, if you got a little cough or sniffle, you're good. Come on in, right?
Mm.
But now there's a different take on that.
Right,
Um,
because that could get people killed.
right. Yeah, and I remember even before COVID, because again, part of my job duties were, kind of promoting attendance, watching our attendance numbers, and for people not familiar with the educational system, attendance is where our money comes from. That's how we're funded.
Yeah.
So, if a child is not present, we are not being paid for that child. So, and that's a whole nother topic, a point of argument,
Yeah.
contention for many families. And I remember having some, very heated parents about, you just want my kid there because you want the money. And it's it's like, no, I want your child present because they need to learn. But if they, obviously if they're ill, they need to stay home.
Yeah.
So I think just rethinking what, just attendance policies, good attendance, what good attendance looks like. There's definitely, we had to, we have, as a given, ed code requires that we have a safety plan. So that's already been something schools do. We had added layers to that this year. So we had things, kind of directives from OSHA that we had to lay out like a pandemic preparedness plan. And some things that, we had all these like little flow charts about what is it? Are they called decision making? They're like the
decision trees.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you have this? Yes, then this, right? So we had all these little charts that had all of that on it. And it gets really, there's more twists and turns to that than I realized. And then, sometimes people just overreacting. There's that, or, there's so many factors. So I feel like we're still waiting guidance on how much of that is going to stick around. I know in California, our governor lifted restrictions on the 15th of this month.
Right.
I had looked earlier today, in anticipation of our talk today, because I know the CDC is releasing guidelines today for schools.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen them earlier today. I don't know if they're out now, but I know that's what, like, we're all on pins and needles, just like waiting to hear what the guidance is going to be.
Right.
But I have a feeling that some of our pandemic preparedness plan will probably stick around. I know that, we're not going in to take out all the air purifiers. We're not going in to take out all the masks and the hand sanitizers, the dispensers. So I know those things will stay in place. I think maybe a bit more attention will be paid to symptoms like, upset stomach, headache, sniffles, things like that you would normally just dismiss. Hey, you're going to be fine. Go back to class, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a little bit more attention paid there. But also, and this is the next thought I have is not something that's just strictly COVID related, but you may already, and people listening may already be aware of the growing movement to have more social emotional learning at school. And my last district was very much one that embraced that, more about, having counseling services available, taking mental health seriously, providing for those like mindfulness moments, wellness breaks, things like that, just being more mindful overall of the things that we're feeling and experiencing. And I think that was already happening before this. And I think with COVID, that really kind of solidified the need, because the kids and the families need that kind of support. Yeah. Especially through something like a pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, the United States is already abysmally one of the worst developed nations as far as actually taking mental health seriously at all, and having any sort of support in the classroom when humans growing up are in their most vulnerable period in their life, really. Right. Definitely would be a very important step. So that's the fact that this kind of highlighted that is a potential positive as well. I mean, you try to take what silver lining you can.
Exactly. And like I said, my co-administrator and myself really recognized from the onset that this, again, number one, first and foremost, this is a terrible situation. Like,
Right.
a pandemic is not a good thing. But having to live through it and deal with it and educate through it, we definitely see some silver lining in terms of opportunities to change education for the better. Because education, as we know it, you know, me, anyone listening, is, you know, it's looked the same for hundreds of years. So, you know, it's let's take this opportunity to change it up.
Right. Yeah. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you have any other thoughts? Also, if anyone listening, do you have any questions while we've got Consuela on the line? But yeah, do you have any additional thoughts that I haven't covered in questioning?
I'm trying to think. You were very thorough. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about things in a more public forum. Like I said, typically the conversations I have are with other educators or my co-administrator, or within my own school district. So I really, at least in speaking for my school site and district, I feel like we did our very best. Was it perfect? No, but I really do feel like, we did our best in terms of supporting our teachers, support our students, support our families. I know that we worked really hard to make the best of it. And so I'm hoping that, wherever anyone listening in their school districts, I hope that they did the same for them. Because I know, their school districts across the country were working hard to try to continue to support their students as best they could.
Yeah.
And so I'm really curious at this point to see, as we come out of this phase, what schools are going to look like. I'm an optimist, so I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I don't expect this dramatic change when we come back. But I'm a little concerned actually that it's going to be more like, yay, back to normal. But we don't want normal. We want better.
Right.
And I'm just hoping it'll give us some doors will be opened to make change. That's the change that's needed. And that more of those conversations could be had because of what we lived through this last school year.
Yeah, and kind of to build on that, even if there's not an immediate change, the fact that it has brought some more things, some more conversations to the table, it at least does open the door for future change, because there are a lot of things and measures and considerations now being discussed, which just weren't even part of everyone's vocabulary, 2, 3, 4 years ago, especially insofar as distance learning. Even if there is a massive reaction to go back to the way things were, people have experienced it now and can discuss it, at least. Like it is on people's mind, and there's a generation currently being raised who has seen it and knows that it's not knows that it actually is at least viable.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. I think for me, as someone who has always been in favor of, educational technology and those tools in the classroom, and as someone who knows that online learning can and does work, that I feel like people got a glimpse of those things. They got probably more than a glimpse.
Yeah.
But they got to experience those things. And again, like I said, it wasn't easy for everyone, but I really do feel like we have some converts now that, they may have struggled at the beginning, but they worked it out toward the end.
Yeah.
And that it's not impossible, and that there are other ways. And so I very much agree with you in terms of that.
Yeah. And obviously it's the kind of thing where if it were implemented for a few years and everybody got familiar with it, the wrinkles would be ironed out. Like a lot of the struggles it sounds like were a byproduct of it just being thrust upon people, and everybody from parents to children to teachers having to adapt all at once with really no background in it, and no prior experience. Whereas if it were an option that just existed, which hopefully happens, there would be that familiarity and that kind of institutional experience from all stakeholders.
Yeah, and I do want to add on to that it wasn't just those stakeholders that had to adapt and adjust. Administrators had to do a lot of adapting and adjusting.
Yes.
As well. And I really felt like our work, like again, myself and my co-administrator, our work was to support teachers. I mean, obviously we're supporting our students and our families, but our teachers, I believe, I mean, they were challenged like I've never seen teachers challenged before. I often have commented to, my colleagues and my staff that, had I been in the classroom at this point in time, I would have loved it. But, I wasn't, but that's only because I've spent so much of my time in this arena.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be like, yay, I finally get to do all the things I wanted to do. But I recognize that I am definitely in the minority in that opinion. Not everybody felt that way. Absolutely not. So there was just a lot of, checking on our teachers and mental well-being, and just being there for them because they're the front line. They're doing the work. And it was really important not to stress them out. They're stressed enough. Mm-hmm. So, and like I told you before, I saw plenty of tears, lots of retirements. They made it through the year, but they had announced early on, I'm retiring. This is it. And we had quite a few retirements at our school. So, that was definitely not, you basically, you're losing teachers who've been in the profession, 30 plus years.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to take, especially when they're good teachers.
Right.
But a lot of it, like I told you before, was rooted in that just total upheaval of everything they knew.
Right.
And making a 30-year teacher feel like a brand new teacher all over again.
Right.
That's not going to sit well.
Yeah.
So, I respect and appreciate their time and dedication to the profession and serving students. And so they definitely deserve their retirement after this year, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time and insights and getting an honest peek into what has happened to what has actually been happening in the schools and school districts. Like I said,
appreciate you asking.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of talk about that, but it's pretty much all from, news pundits and politicians rather than people who are actually in the classroom or, directly involved in the schools themselves. So it's like, I've felt like that piece has been really missing from the conversation. So really valuable insights. And I guess in about a year you're going to be Dr. Consuela, so that's exciting.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking about that as another point, because often as administrators we're always looking to what the research says. Well, there's a whole slew of new research now about online learning.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, I know as someone who has to research to write my dissertation that you can take a set of data and spin it in a variety of different ways.
Sure.
But there's going to be a lot of data out there to analyze. And There already is. I've seen the reports and things coming out already. And it is mixed. So, but, taking a closer look at the research and trying to figure out what's going to serve your population and what's going to serve them best. It's just so much more information to learn from.
Yeah.
And so I look forward to, to digging into that and making some decisions that are going to help our students, achieve. Because one of the other things that is in the media a lot is about learning loss, right? Oh, they've lost a year. I would disagree with that. Learning on the whole was decreased this last year. I was even looking at some of the reporting on that. It was decreased. Was it a total loss? No, but there's some things we have to do. But as always, as an administrator, as an educator, there are always gaps to close.
Right.
We always have to close gaps. So I don't see it any different than what we already focused on. We're looking at where our students are at, what they need, and doing our best to provide them supports and services that they need to close the gap and to grow and to achieve. So to me, it's I don't call it a learning loss. Yes, they were impacted. Everybody was. So let's just work together to help, people move forward and be successful.
Very good. As kind of a closing point, or closing statement, sort of thing, I wanted to comment on this picture because obviously you're an educator in real life,
Yes.
but also you and I help with teaching photography in Second
Yes.
Life,
Mhm.
and this is where this photo came from.
Yes.
And yeah, it came out really good, obviously.
Yeah, I enjoyed making it. And that's one of the other things too, is that I know this is not a topic about Second Life, but
It's
um,
fine. I'm
it's
derailing it over to that. So
yeah. But I came to Second Life as a virtual world as an educator.
mhm.
What 13 years ago, according to my oldest avatar. So and it was that's again, I think that speaks to how long I've been interested in online learning and the different platforms and ways you can learn, and that I know online learning can be engaging. So to have people tell me that online learning is not good or it doesn't work and it just damages students, I argue with every single time, because that's not true. So
Right.
as an educator, I have that experience in that virtual world, and I know that there is a lot of different universities and educators working in Second Life, Minecraft, all these different other places,
Mhm.
just trying to reach kids and students. And I know it can be successful. You just have to, it's just, you're thinking about it a little differently. You're thinking outside of the box.
Yeah.
You're utilizing technologies that exist. And, and you and I know how much adults are impacted by the work that we do with our virtual photography institute.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible the power that technology has. It's just there waiting to be harnessed. And um, it's a tool for us to use. It's not the end all be all. It's one of the things we can use, and that's what I'm trying to to get my teachers to recognize. And I even had talked to my co-administrator. I love the idea of esports and things like that. And I was already talking to him about, I used to run a Minecraft club when I was in the classroom.
Really?
So, yeah,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
Is that new for you?
I have never heard of that. I love that.
Yeah.
A
Mhm.
Minecraft club.
Yeah, and there's Minecraft EDU and all the different things you could do and design and just get to work
Wow.
in Minecraft. And students loved it. And
Yeah, talk about student engagement. That's gonna
yeah. And so when I mentioned that to my co-administrator, he was all about it. So I have a feeling there might be another Minecraft club
all
happening.
right.
But like either that, and again, I think my population might be a little young for esports. That tends to be more of a high school, middle school thing. But I'm really, that's like, again, that's my wheelhouse. I love stuff like that. I love relating games and fun to education, and just making school different for kids.
Yeah.
And that's some of the programming I'm looking forward to talking with my co-administrator about this coming school year.
Okay. Well, yeah. Look forward to hearing some of those success stories coming out, the Minecraft club and stuff.
Sorry.
No problem.
Dogs are all irritated.
Yes. All right. Well,
thank you so much for having me, for inviting me. I know we've been talking about this for a little while, and I'm really glad that we got to do it.
Me too. Me too.
And thank you, Shaloon, for your comment. I appreciate that.
All right. I will let you tend to your dogs, and I suppose you'll be hopping in stream, in chat a little bit later. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll be there. Thank you again.
Okay. Take care.
You too.